name was Lola.
She
was a showgirl.
She had
at the
yellow feathers in her hair. and her dress tucked under
Copacabana.
the hair.
I love that song to death.
I just love singing with you, Garrett. That's what it comes down to. Hello.
Hey guys,
Hello.
What up?
welcome to our show,
This is Tudor. I hardly know her.
The Last Tudor.
Too fast, two-door, furious.
It's Tude Fast, Tude Furious.
All right, wait. Tudor fast, Tudor furious.
There you go.
Uh,
This episode's all about carriage racing.
Tudor fast, Tokyo Drift.
Here we see King Henry riding away on a white Bronco.
He's not O.J. Simpson, Jeff.
You don't know that.
Crime jokes.
Does the glove fit?
Apparently not. Hey, everyone.
That's funny because both of them killed their wives. Ooh.
Henry VIII wrote a book that said, "If I did it."
Here's how I would do it. And then
how I
sequels.
actually did it.
And then he would get caught robbing a residence of his favorite codpiece and get sent to jail for that.
And he starred in my favorite play, Naked Gun.
That's the Shakespeare play, right? Naked Gun?
Yes.
Or was that
Yeah.
Marlowe? Shakespeare or Marlowe? Guys, help us out. Was that Shakespeare or Marlowe?
were plays ever done in the style of those old Zucker Brothers movies? Is there any plays like that? Are there any plays like that? I'm sorry.
Like what?
Like those old school like spoof movies that like Airplane, The Naked Gun.
Are there any
Like-
plays like that?
Yeah, like stage plays, because that'd be amazing.
That would be a blast.
Spamalot was sort of like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Let's make one. Let's write a play. Garrett, let's do
Airplane,
that.
the musical.
Let's
Then
do
we have to star in it.
Let's do a spoof Shakespeare about Henry VIII. Oh my God! And we'll just call it Tudor. I hardly know her. I don't know why this isn't happening right this fucking instant.
Yeah, this was the end goal, Emily. Like once this
Thank
happens,
you.
we're fucking.
It only
out of
took
the
60
game.
episodes to get me here. It just took 60 episodes to get us here.
Anyway, enough of the.
What are we
rant.
actually talking
Let's get
about
to
today?
Let's get to the brain scramble.
Let's get to the juicy bits. Speaking of juicy bits, I was going to talk about prostitutes today.
Wait, is
but-
that the subject? Oh man.
It was going to be. So here's what happened. I was all pumped to talk about prostitutes and sex during the Tudor times, and then I realized we've already done a sex episode, how do I say that? Sexapode episode.
A saxophone.
Sexcapode?
Sexcapode episode. Yeah, a sexcapode.
An episode about banging.
That sounds awful. We did. We already had one of those episodes, and so if I did just prostitution, then it wouldn't be nearly enough. So I have a couple of episodes that always happen like that, where I'm like, I'm gonna do an episode about this, and then it's like 10 minutes worth of info. So one day I'm gonna just do a big mishmashy episode of all those little
A
bits.
variety episode.
It'll be the clip episode.
Yeah.
So instead, I decided to talk about the Battle of Bosworth.
Barry.
Barry Bosworth. He was a very
the guy,
nice
right?
accountant.
Barry Bosworth, yeah. He was in Spin
Okay.
City. And he was also in Weekend at Bernie's too.
Is he an actor?
Okay, that make.
Yeah.
Barry Bosworth or Barry Bostwick?
Guys, I think
It's close.
I think
Barry Bosworth is an author, but Barry Bostwick is an actor.
Barry
That's who I'm probably
Bostwick.
thinking
God,
of.
please tell me that's a real name and not something Barry Bostwick. I've never heard that name.
Barry Bostwick, he was in.
Weekend at Bernie's apparently and Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
He was Brad in Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
Oh, it is Brad. Hey, Brad. So also, unrelated to Barry Bostwick or the Battle of Bosworth. Jeff and I were talking the other night, and I kind of have an idea that I want to float by you, Garrett, and also some of our listeners. I'm playing with the idea of doing a second Tudor podcast, and this one would be more serious and more in-depth, and it would be by seasons.
And less Garrett Jeff.
It would be Emily only. Sorry, guys.
Oh my God.
It wouldn't
How
be.
dare you cut me out of this?
She's spinning
You're
off.
still in this one. It's a spinoff. So I was thinking about doing this podcast, and it would be seasons. So it'd be, I don't know, maybe 10 episodes per season, and it would be covering the entirety of the Tudors' reign. So the first season would be about Henry VII. The second and probably the third would be about Henry VIII, and then I'd move on to his kids. And it would be as in depth as I can make it as a non-historian, armchair historian. And I kind of really want to do it, but I also want to gauge some interest in this. So if y'all are listening and you want to hear less funny but still interesting Henry VIII, Henry VII, and his itty bitty babies, if you want to hear that stuff, shout out to me. Let me know. I might start it as soon as this summer, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Garrett, what do you think?
Oh yeah, sure. Just do another show without me. Jeff and I will do our own show.
Actually, Jeff is planning another show.
Jeff, what are you doing?
But I want you involved.
In one episode. You get to be a guest.
We'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
We gotta talk Tudor.
Let's talk.
Talking the Tudors.
Let's talk funny Tudor. Are you ready?
Whackity schmackity doo.
So, the Battle of Bosworth is the final battle. Fun fact, it was the last battle where an English king died. And that was in 1485. And this was the battle where Henry VII defeated Richard III.
Cool.
So, it's kind of a baller battle. It happened really quickly. It was over by noon.
There were elves and dwarves and ogres.
And there was a really pretty white city carved into a cliff.
Yeah.
And an elephant appeared. And they won an Oscar.
Yeah.
It was the Oscar-winning Battle of Bosworth. So, background for you boys. The Battle of Bosworth was at the end of the Wars of the Roses. Richard III had already deposed his nephews and declared them bastards anyway, and also his other niece and nephew. So he was the only king. And he was of the York side. Henry Tudor was in France, hiding away, and he was on the Lancaster side. So you remember the Wars of the Roses was Yorks versus Lancasters, and they both wanted some of the crown. So Richard was on the throne, and Henry was in France. So according to it didn't actually get called the Battle of Bosworth until about 25 years later. It had contemporaries of that time called it the Battle of Readymore, the Battle of Brownheath, and the Battle of Sandiford. And those all just sound like law firms to me. This is Readymore, Brownheath, and Sandiford. Have you been injured? Do you want your money now?
Call us now.
1-800.
If you've been injured in a war.
Ye old lawyer. Dr. Lawyer. So it wasn't called the Battle of Bosworth until about 25 years later. So Bosworth is in Leicester. Leicester, in case you're curious, and it totally looks like it should be pronounced Leicester, but it's Leicester because England. And it was near the market of Bosworth, so that's probably where the name came from. So it was on marshy plains, not usually a good battlefield area. Richard had 15,000 men. Things were looking good for him. Henry only had 6,000 men. And then there was a third component to this battle that was super interesting, and it was Thomas Stanley. There were two Stanley brothers, William and Thomas. And Thomas was Henry's stepfather. yet he pledged loyalty to Richard III. William and Thomas were kind of standing apart from both of the armies with about 6,000 men, just kind of watching, waiting to see what happened
Let's
before
see who
committing.
win this.
Kind of, pretty much. So Henry was at a distinct disadvantage because, first of all, he sailed from France to South Wales. The sea sucked, and that was August 7th.
Boy, are their arms tired.
Boy, were their arms. That doesn't even work, Jeff.
They swam.
No. Take back your joke.
No.
I don't appreciate your humor.
Who decides where a battle's going to be at in those times? Like, do you say, like, army just starts
Is this,
marching to the
All
field
right,
and
wait,
they're like, all right.
I want you to think. How are battles decided now, Jeff?
Yeah. It's just
Some
like
asshole's
whoever,
like,
like,
hey,
they
it's
just
happening
they just
here.
happen
This
to
is where it's
meet in
going down.
happenstance of like where the armies seem to collide.
Battles were typically okay. So if it's in a war, like whenever England invaded France, they tried to find strategically valuable cities. So the capitals would have been the strategically valuable ones, port cities, things like that, and then fort cities, right?
Yeah.
Then there are ones like this where it's just kind of shit. There's an invading army. Let's go meet them, and it's kind of wherever you meet.
See, it's
I
always,
don't think anybody sends out a courier pigeon and saying, "Hey, Bosworth looks like
Hey,
Bosworth is large and marshy, and
meet
it
at
doesn't look
Bosworth at 10 a.m.
right."
Those bastards are running late. Well, see, I always watch all these movies and shows where you just see like two giant armies just like gather at one spot and like
It kind of
how they know to go there.
because they're watching each other. So one of the army, it's defense and offense. One of the armies is marching towards a goal of capturing something.
yeah,
right?
the other one's just defending it.
The other's defending
Yeah.
it. So they've got spies going back and forth and writers going back and forth giving them information, you know. And then there are cities that are typically attacked. Calais, for example. England held Calais forever, and then it was always strategically helpful if France got it back, so it was kind of expected to be attacked.
Okay.
But that's Calais, a city, not Bosworth, a big empty marshy boggy field.
Yeah, because I always laugh like, hey, they always conveniently find a huge field to fight in.
No, it's because they knew Henry was coming that way.
Yeah.
And that's just where Richard intercepted him.
Okay.
Good question.
I'm just curious.
I just really like the idea now of armies being like, hey, we found this location over there. How's
Please
that?
RSVP to this battle. I'll send them.
They sent out an
I'll make
evite.
a Facebook group.
I'll
It's
make
okay.
a Facebook event for the Battle of Bosworth.
Trying to find out where it is and trying to use old-timey GPS. We should have making a left at that last tree, Henry.
Fuck. So
I know where I'm going.
Use GPS, the Great Pigeon System.
his wife is or his
That was
girlfriend
good,
is
Jeff.
just
I
like,
like that a lot.
could you please stop and ask for directions now? We just passed another blacksmith shop. I know where I'm going. Let me ride the horse.
Oh God. Roll up the windows. Peasants.
Oh shit, we're in the bad part of town.
So Emily,
Garrett.
in a marching band of an army, like how many people would normally like go into battle?
Just
Or
so you
would that
know, I
just vary?
totally just pictured a marching band. Like,
I didn't mean it like that.
what was your question? How do they determine how many people are going?
Well, like how many would normally be in a?
Oh, it varied. Sometimes
It's
it'd
really just
be.
whoever you can get to join you at the time.
It's really who you can get to join you. So Richard was able to summon his the people. So here's the way it kind of worked back then. Richard was the head, and then all of his lords were beneath him, and the lords owned parcels of land, and the people who worked those parcels of land he was called the liege lord. And so they had to serve him whenever he so he would muster his troops. The troops would serve the liege lord. So
Okay.
when Thomas and William Stanley went to their own respective areas, so that's why like dukedoms are so powerful. Part of why it's because they were wealthy lands because they made lots of money, but also they had tons of people they could muster for support. So when Thomas and William Stanley went to their respective lands, they were able to hold their men back because the men weren't mustering for Richard. They were mustering for their liege lord whom they knew. So Richard got his loyal nobles to muster about 15,000. And Henry, he hired about 2,000 mercenaries. He came over from France. Interesting fact, that may have been where the sweating sickness came from. But he hired about 2,000 mercenaries. And then as he marched, his numbers swelled. So it reached about 6,000. And that was just people kind of joining him. It was some liege lords joining with their soldiers. It was kind of a... I mean, it was organized.
Kind of a ragtag.
It was organized, but a little bit ragtag. It wasn't as like...
Well,
the
yeah,
Facebook event was not as successful.
Because at least with Richard, did they really have like any kind of military back then?
Yeah.
So like,
not the way we think of it today.
Well, because like
it's like
like Rome, like the ancient Rome, like had military.
They did, and they were trained. Real, I don't think. No, and that's actually so. I'm listening to a podcast called Revolutions, and the first season is about the English Civil War, and it's talking about the military problems with them. The lords and whatnot, they would study military as like maybe an interest. Maybe they really want to go to war. But during Charles the first, I can never remember. Charles the First, during his reign, nobody had military background leading the army. So it's not like what's that famous military school we have in the States? West Point. Yeah, it's not. They didn't have a West Point.
Okay.
And they didn't have like boot camp.
Yeah.
It was and war was.
Here's your sword and here's your arrow and hope you don't die.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure exactly what kind of military. If there's any military historian back listening, please.
Because that's always kind of fascinating to me about like how nowadays everyone thinks about how every country has their own army and like their government pays
and
for
military is a career.
And back then there wasn't that much of that. Like Vietnam. Rome was such a big exception. It was such a So I thought about that.
Would you know how many of the soldiers were like actual like career military guys and how many were just like peasant? You come on,
pick up that sword.
Not a clue. It was probably there was probably not a peasant who's educated enough in military matters to be a militarist, if that's a word.
A soldier.
The lords, earls, etc. They would have been the ones with military knowledge because they'd fought.
Well, not necessarily military knowledge, but like soldiers, like foot soldiers.
Yeah, I don't think anybody. So, don't quote me on this. I didn't look this up, but I think there were some occasional soldiers who were paid for a specific duty. Like if they went overseas, they would then be paid upon their return. Because if they died, whatever. And that was actually an issue Elizabeth had. She didn't pay some of her soldiers when they came back from France. And so they were all pissy with her. But I don't think it was like a standing army. It was more like the reservists.
Huh.
Okay.
So when Henry landed in England, Richard was fucking pumped. He was like, I am ready to get rid of this little shit rag. So he quickly gathered his soldiers and they went to battle. They met at Bosworth, and Richard was positioned on one hill, but because Henry had seen Star Wars and knew about high ground, he was also on another hill.
My hill is slightly taller than yours.
So Henry stayed more towards the back of his army, and Richard III fought. Henry fought, but Richard was like in the thick of it.
That's one of my next questions I was going to ask, but I'll let you continue.
So, well, I think I know what you're going to ask, and I'll get to it. The kings could. I know what Jeff was going to ask whether the kings fought. It depended on the king.
Yeah.
Henry VII. Yeah. Henry VII fought. Henry VIII went with his armies to France whenever they invaded. But Richard III was the last one killed in battle. And the kings usually always went, but some of them would stay behind. Some of them would actually be involved in the fighting. It just depended on the king.
Yeah.
Richard fought pretty fucking valiantly. So
I was gonna say, I feel like there'd be a lot more saying like, hey, you cannot go out and risk your life out there. I mean, it's cool, it's valiant and all, Richie, but
you'd think that's why it was important.
Kind of need you.
Kings, gotta measure their dick to kind of
there was
look,
I mean, did they give
super
them like
dick
the best
measuring.
weapons and stuff?
There was super dick measuring happening. Anytime France and England went nose to nose, it was really dick to dick.
yeah, especially when it's Richard.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the Stanley family just because they're really important in the outcome of this battle. So Thomas and his brother William kind of flipped a lot throughout the Wars of the Roses to whichever end suited them. So Thomas, I'm going to talk about him most. So he married the sister of Warwick the Kingmaker. Warwick the Kingmaker was the guy who actually got the Yorks on the throne.
Yeah.
And he married his sister, so he was allied to the Yorks. Things were going well. Sister died, as history dictates, and he married Margaret Beaufort. Margaret Beaufort was Henry's mother. She'd already had him. I think it was her fourth marriage? Third? It depends on if you count her first marriage. So during the Battle of Blore Heath, yeah, I think it might be a Scottish E name. Blore, B-L-O-R-E, Blore. It's British, so it's probably like, you don't pronounce the L. It's Bore.
It's Boris.
It's Bore. So Blore Heath.
We'll get a correction.
What?
We'll get a correction.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. So that battle was in 1459, and Stanley had about 2,000 men he could have brought to the field, and yet once again, I mean not once again, for the first time, he kind of just stood on the side watching. So he decided after that was a really good tactic. So eventually, more flip-flopping when Richard III had some people arrested for defending the rights of the princes in the Tower. Mm-hmm. Stanley was almost one of those men. Richard actually excused him for that because Richard really needed allies. So he was like, "No, it's totally cool." Margaret Beaufort, his wife, however, as the mother of the other claimant to the throne, she was involved in a lot of shit, including Buckingham's rebellion. And Richard actually stripped her of her lands and titles, but she gave them to Stanley. So it didn't really have an effect. Stanley still inherited the wealth, but Margaret, it was more like a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
So Stanley also supported Richard during Buckingham's rebellion, but there's a possibility he was involved and he was playing both sides, because if Buckingham won, his stepson would have been on the throne.
Okay.
If Buckingham lost, then Richard still pretends to be part of, or then Stanley still pretends to be part of Richard III's buddy system. Really, really crazy guy. Okay, and then this is the good part. 1485, when all this shit was going down, Stanley at one point asked Richard if he could leave court. He was like, I gotta go. There's stuff for me back home. Richard said, "That's totally cool. You can go, but I want your son to stay as my hostage." His son was Lord Strange, so now I'm just totally picturing Dr. Strange. Just like floating in the corner of Richard III's.
Mr. Doctor.
Mr. Doctor. It's strange. Yes.
Yeah.
So during that time, Stanley and his brother, the other Stanley, were communicating with Henry, and they basically were like, if you come to Wales, we're not going to stop you. And then Richard called Thomas, and he was like, you have to come back and join me. And Thomas pulled a Ferris Bueller and was like, I have the sweating sickness. I think I have the black lung. I think I got the black lung, Pop. So he was like, can't come, too sick. And Richard was pissed and went to Lord Strange. I will never not want to say that. And Lord Strange confessed to Richard about all of their involvement with Henry Tudor. So he said his dad, his uncle, and himself were all involved in okaying Henry Tudor to come. So Richard declared him a traitor, and he said, I have your son. If you don't join me at this battle, his life is forfeit. To which Stanley replied, Sire, I have other sons. So he was kind of a dick. Super dick. During the battle, Richard actually ordered Lord Strange to be executed. It was a battle, got a little chaotic, didn't actually happen, but it was ordered.
Some things were said, not very nice things.
They were rude. Then the actual battle happened. So
and then we fight.
So Henry's army was led by John de Vere. He was the Earl of Oxford. And Richard's army was led by the elderly Duke of Norfolk. Duke didn't last long. He died pretty quickly. And then in Richard's vanguard, which is like his rear army, they didn't really do much. They were led by Henry Percy. He was the Earl of Northumberland. Fun fact, if you are an avid Tudor fan, this was the same Percy family that Anne Boleyn tried to marry into. And Wolsey stopped it. But it was led by Henry Percy. He was the Earl of Northumberland. And there were about 7,000 men in the vanguard. And they didn't do anything. It may have been Percy trying to help Henry. Mm-hmm. It may have been, I can't do anything. It may have been, oh my God, we're standing in a fucking marsh. But they didn't do much, which presented a liability when Richard saw Henry across the field, because they've got their standards, they've got their flags on sticks and people waving them around saying the king's right here, pinning a fucking target on them. And so Richard was like, well, fuck it, I'll just kill the little shit. So he goes forward, kind of breaks away from big part of his army. Vanguard couldn't do anything. And after that, after the battle, Henry Percy survived until the people who were loyal to him killed him because they saw it as a failure. Maybe not so loyal. But as I said, they had the standard bearers. They were waving their fucking target flags. And Richard was like, I'm done. I just want to kill this little fucker. So when Richard broke away and when that vanguard was no longer really a vanguard, William Stanley, the other brother, the second brother, the non-main Stanley, he turned his army of 6,000 men to help Henry, together with Thomas Stanley.
Cool.
So William started it, Thomas followed. He's like, okay.
All right, I got nothing else to do.
So that's kind of when everything went to hell. So Richard was pretty formidable during this fight, and apparently all of the fighting that was happening around the standards of these two kings was incredibly brutal. Henry's standard bearer, William Brandon, was killed. William Brandon had a little boy at home named Charles that you guys may know of.
Oh.
Fun fact, Charles Brandon...
Sorry, the standard bearer, did they just kind of hold the flag, or did they fight?
I mean, they might have jabbed with the stick.
Hey, get out of here. Gotta hold the flag.
Back away. No. Well, I mean, Richard's also got injured. His legs were cut out from under him. Yet he valiantly held onto the flag. So I guess good standard bearing. Hey, fun fact
Took his job very seriously.
Fun fact about Charles Brandon. William Brandon died on August 22nd of 1485. And Charles also died on August 22nd, but of 1545.
Huh.
Interesting, huh? So anyway, Richard's standard bearer was cut down. And Richard was kind of on like a rampage, like Archer type rampage at that point. He's a very small man. But there was a 6'8" soldier, which that's tall now. Imagine back then.
Yeah,
when
that's a big boy.
Giant.
Like 5'8" was tall. So he was like a foot taller than tall people.
He was like the mountain.
He was like the mountain, and Richard III was just like, fuck you, and knocked him over.
Oh, I mean, you just take a string and tie their legs up and they're down.
Have you ever seen that really old movie? So here's a quote from John Strauss, R-O-U-S, whatever. And he who had compared Richard to the Antichrist, said, If I may say the truth to his credit, though small in body and feeble of limb, he bore himself like a gallant knight and acted with distinction as his own champion until his last breath. So, then Richard's horse got trapped in the fucking bog. And so Richard had to abandon him. Somebody offered him a horse to flee, and he said, "God forbid I yield one step. This day I will die as a king or win." So pretty cool.
That's pretty badass.
Pretty badass. Shakespeare, of course, a Tudor propagandist, has him saying in his play Richard III, a horse, a kingdom for my horse. Truth be told, I've never read Richard III.
I've heard that, and I never knew the context, so that's pretty good.
Now you know. So, Richard
III
did not try and...
get him say, exit, stage left.
Heavens to Murgatroyd.
Heavens to Murgatroyd. No, Richard III did not actually try and leave the battle. He said he would die as a king. So then Richard was brutally killed. Oh, now we know how he died. Do you guys want to hear the details?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There is a weapon called a halberd. Probably said
halberd is not like a pole arm type weapon.
It's a 6-foot stick with an axe on the end.
Yeah, those things are great.
Unless you're Richard III. So Richard was wearing a crown on top of his helmet because he's the king.
Good
and
to know.
His helmet was cut off. When they found his skull, there were gouge marks in the jaw from where the chin had been cut. The chin strap of the helmet had been cut. He was stabbed in the face by a dagger. There were gouge marks on the front of his skull. Several dagger stab marks. The back of his skull was sheathed off by a halberd.
Oh my God. Also, you said halberd?
Halberd, I think.
Okay, I thought you said halberd, and that's something completely different.
Halberd, Halberd.
Yes. Okay. At first, I thought you said halberd, and I was like, that sounds like a thing. But
I may have
I
may have combined the words because I think there's a
Halberd.
I think there's an
H-A-U-B-E-R-K is armor. It's like chainmail armor, kind of.
Okay. Sorry, my bad. I screwed that up. I wrote it halberd, but I didn't say it right.
I don't know if I might have just heard you wrong.
I think it was a combo
It doesn't
of
matter.
both. We're
Halberds
both
are great,
to blame.
and I love them.
So the back of his skull was sheathed off, and if that didn't kill him, the sword through the base of his skull and into his brain certainly finished him off.
Everybody wanted to be the guy that said, "I killed Richard III."
Yeah, but then Stanley, the ever loyal stepfather, picked up Richard's crown and placed it on his stepson's head. So he was like, "We won." Richard was treated with the utmost respect and dignity. I'm just kidding. Henry sucked. He placed him naked on a horse, trussed up like a pig, with his genitals exposed.
Jesus Christ.
And then he was taken to Leicester for public display. I don't think the public display part, I mean, if he'd been clothed, it would have been like, look, he's actually dead. There, you can't bullshit later on and say he's not. But yeah, Henry wasn't gentle. Henry's army lost 100 men. Richard's army lost 1,000.
Oh, shit.
Oh, my God.
Turd. And as a reminder, Richard's army was double the size. Double Mitgum.
See, if you call your army ragtag, then you're going to win no matter what.
It's like a Cinderella story.
Underdog.
Exactly.
So 10 years later, 1495, Henry actually paid for a marble grave marker for Richard. But a bunch of changes to the friary happened. One of those changes being Henry VIII said it doesn't exist anymore. And then the land changed. So the grave marker, I think it was inside a building, but then when the building was destroyed at some point or another, probably in the English Civil War, the grave marker kind of disintegrated. And it disappeared, but it was kind of known. Everybody was like, his body is there. We just don't have a marker for it. Mm-hmm. And then in the city nearby, there were tons of legends about it. There was a body in the river, something about a local stone coffin. So tons of ideas about what Richard III's body was doing near. And then there was the Richard III Society, who is just in love with Richard, and they really want to prove the world wrong about him being an asshole. So they were really interested in finding his body. In 1975, someone wrote that the Richard's body was hidden under a car park in Leicester, which, if you're American, that's a parking lot in Leicester City Council. And then in 2005, mitochondrial DNA from Richard III's sister was identified. So do you guys know what mitochondrial DNA is?
Yes.
Okay, Jeff doesn't. So Garrett, correct me if I'm wrong. Mitochondrial DNA is the way, it's really the only way to identifying a genetic match, I suppose. Not genetic match like he committed a crime and left behind some hair.
Yeah.
But to prove the relation, and it goes through the female line. So Richard III had a sister, and 19 generations removed, they had a matching mitochondrial DNA to confirm. So if they did find Richard's body, they could confirm that it was Richard through that mitochondrial DNA. So then the group got serious about trying to find Richard. And on August 25th, which is super cool because if it had been on the 22nd, it would have been the actual anniversary. But August 25th of 2002, a skeleton with a curved spine and scarred bones was discovered. And on February 4th, 2013, Richard III was officially found. They confirmed it was him. So he beat out Jimmy Hoffa as the hide-and-seek champion of the world.
Well, no, because no one found Jimmy Hoffa yet, did they?
I mean, yes, but Richard III died in 1485. So
well,
Jimmy Hoffa's got quite a long while to go.
No one's found Hoffa yet.
Let's see how long. Hold on.
He's got a ways to go.
528. How long has Jimmy Hoffa been missing?
Shit, I don't know.
God, I heard about Jimmy Hoffa before. Like I knew Jimmy Hoffa references before I even knew about Jimmy Hoffa.
Exactly. Like you would just hear about it in like TV or cartoons or something. He vanished in 1975.
So he's got. Hold on. He's got 485 years to go before he can be Richard III.
Guess he's just got to settle for the.
Ooh, he'll
silver.
have to settle for the bronze.
Yeah, did they just find Amelia Earhart's bones?
Yeah, but that story comes up every 3 years. We think we found her, guys. Everybody finds Amelia Earhart's bones every 3 years.
She's in space.
Yeah, let's just be serious. She went home to her
I've watched
planet.
Star Trek. She's in space.
Is that what happens in Star Trek?
Yep.
Everything
and
happens
Star
in
Trek
Star
Voyager,
Trek.
they find her.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did she accidentally end up in space, or was she an alien?
She was kidnapped.
Ooh, by aliens?
Yeah.
Did they probe her?
They find a ship with different people from different generations that have been like preserved.
Did they find Elvis too?
No, he just went home.
Thanks, Kay.
Good Men in
Was it
Black
Jay?
reference.
It was Kay.
Very good Men in Black reference.
So how did they know Richard's body was under that car park?
I don't. So I was following one
Well, if
article talking about
If
it.
I learned anything
and
from Jurassic Park, they probably just shot shotgun shells and to create a seismic wave to find readings.
yes, that's
And
what
then
happened.
Sam Neill had like a finger bone and
yes,
some fat
and
child with it.
he scared the shit out of a
Richard
fat
doesn't
kid.
attack you from the front, but from the side.
And that's when the attack comes. Not from the front, but from the side. From the other two Richards you didn't even know were there.
The point is, Richard eats
you while you are still alive. No. So
So dumb.
what? You're picturing it, aren't you?
I know.
Okay, so the reason they probably figured it out is because they know he was buried in the Greyfriars Church, and it was really just about tracing the historical records of what happened to the Greyfriar Priory. Friary? I think it was called Friar. Fuck, I'm losing. Words are
Was
losing
there a
meaning.
fire? The fire fryer?
I think there might have been a fire in the fire. So I think they just tracked it through historical records of what happened to the Greyfriars.
Gotcha.
So they were like, oh, well, from this time it was a monastery, but then afterwards when Henry destroyed it, it became a public whatever, and then it was changed, and They suspected for a long time that his body was there. When I heard about his body being discovered, I was under the assumption that they were just doing standard construction work. No, they hadn't. They actually had an idea that it was under there. They knew
That's
that.
what I was assuming. They were just like, well, time to redo this parking lot. Holy shit, there's a body here.
I totally thought that.
Now,
That's how we're gonna find Jimmy
was he
Hoffa.
just buried just in the dirt body, or did he have like a coffin or anything kind of
The
like?
coffin would have disintegrated.
Yeah.
It was just in the dirt.
Okay.
I made a joke about something else was. Oh, one of Henry VII's beds was found buried under a car park too. So if you're ever missing anything in England, it's probably under a car park. Kings, beds,
Can't find anything. Car park.
car park. So that is Richard III's brutal death on the Battle of Bosworth and how the Tudors came to the throne.
How often did Richard like fight in battle? Like how many battles was he probably involved in?
He wasn't king very long, so not
Okay.
many.
Because like that's why you hear about these big battles. But you're like, was there many battles those particular kings like Henry and Richard even involved in?
Henry
before that?
Henry wasn't actively involved in a ton. Richard wasn't actively involved in a ton. Edward IV was. Henry VI. He was mentally feeble, but I think he still appeared on the fields, and that's how he ended up getting himself taken hostage at some
Okay.
point. So
Normally.
it just depended. Yes, Garrett.
I always get this confused. When were guns used on the battlefield? Is this too early, or is this?
This
around
was
the right
probably
time?
too early, but it was within
Okay.
the span of guns. Hold on.
Okay. Because
Well,
I
talked
remember
about-
saying something about it in an earlier episode.
Well, we talked
You're
about mace
no,
guns.
idiot. They totally had guns then.
We talked about mace guns with Henry VIII, but like I think they were not quite as effective back then because they weren't quite perfected.
So cannons were used in
looking-
this battle. I think one report said 140 cannons were used on Richard's side.
See, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up gunpowder and when it started to be
Well, gunpowder
widely
is
used, but I'm just getting that stupid Kit Harington
Old. That's a good show. Several other commentators have pointed out when guns were first utilized as weapons, one of the first major battles in Europe where guns and cannons were a key deciding factor was the Battle of Castillon in 1453,
So not
when
far
the
off from
French
this.
used them to devastate an attacking English force near the end of the 100 Years' War.
Okay.
So
So they were
So I didn't know
just
if,
starting
like,
around that
this,
time.
so there was a
'Cause this
Japanese.
ties-
Oh fuck, that sounds cool. The Chinese had
What?
something called a hand cannon.
They're called Roman
I
candles.
mean,
Shut up.
that's just a gun is just a tiny cannon.
Yeah, I know, but it's got a cooler name.
Yeah, that's true.
In the 14th century, 1368. They were used a lot in the 1600s. I would say late 1450s.
Okay. Well,
Um,
because that ties back to what I was trying to ask earlier. I can't remember if I got an answer, but like, because if a king decided he wanted to go out and fight in battle, I would imagine they'd want to give him like the best armor and the best weapon.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
to make
but-
sure he's
but-
figured
Biggest
it out.
codpiece.
the guns were actually not as reliable, so weapons were, or so swords and bladed weapons were like the preferred.
Right. I don't know if they'd be like, here, just take this pistol. So you got one shot, baby, but you
Well-
take somebody out.
In the show The Tudors, they show Henry VIII shooting with a gun, but it's on this like huge mount, and it seemed to be more of a like archery is today, like a sport.
Yeah.
We don't take
Yeah.
bows into battle. They didn't take guns into battle. So
It's more of a novelty.
kind of, yeah. I mean, if you
Okay.
think about how long it would have taken to load a gun,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one good shot.
if you're the only one with a gun and everybody else has a sword
Have a gun.
and everybody else has a sword and it takes you 30 seconds to load a gun.
How old was Henry during all this?
Fuck. Young. He was, I think he might have been our age. Herney. I love it when I can't spell. Herney. Not Henry VIII. He was 28. He was our age.
Oh wow.
Oh
Yeah.
man,
I haven't
29,
invaded a
makes me feel like
kingdom
shit.
yet. My life is meaningless. I have not yet invaded a kingdom.
I got the sweet podcast.
I got a sweet fucking podcast. And maybe another one. Let me know if you guys want it. Please say yes. I want to do it. Anyway, that's it.
Okay.
Sorry we didn't get to talk about prostitutes.
I guess we'll take violence
day.
instead.
Eh. If you're Jack, never mind. I was gonna make a Jack the Ripper joke.
Oh.
So guys, find us on Twitter at Tudor Know Her and on Facebook at Tudor I Hardly Know Her. And that's it for me. Rate and review us.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Any new listeners we may have had. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining us and listening to us. And yeah, it's been a good what, year and a half
Year and a half.
almost of doing this show.
Yeah, we've
we were
had
realizing
some-
the other day how long we've been doing this now.
We've had a lot of new listeners lately, so thanks everybody. It's super cool that you found us, and I'm still in awe that you guys are listening. So way to go, you.
What was I heard the other day? Oh, like a thing people do now will listen to podcasts at like
One and a half times speed.
so they can go through it faster.
Yep, I think it's called like speed podcast.
So I just like want to be a
now
dick.
that's
and
what I call
I want to
podcasting.
start talking really slowly so that when they speed it up, I sound normal.
Oh,
Yeah, like how the chipmunks.
Yeah, don't do that. That's dumb. Look, guys, enjoy your life. You don't need to rush through everything just so you can absorb as much information as
Just
possible. Like,
Take your time. Let us.
Maybe they don't have a lot of time. They're like, well, but I want to listen to this. I mean, if you
I
I
think
wanna
there's
hear.
a difference
Good on
between
you.
listening to an episode because you've got like 20 minutes of free time, but it's a 30-minute episode and you do a 1.5 times. Like, that's a difference versus I want to absorb as many podcasts as I can, and it doesn't matter. Like,
all right,
like
think about all the times that you do things, and you're not listening to podcasts, but you could be listening to a podcast. For example, you're on the toilet.
that's true.
You know, it's a big one. You got
In the shower.
you're going to spend some time listen to podcasts.
Cleaning.
In the shower, listen to podcasts.
Cleaning.
If you're making love, listen to a podcast.
Oh my God, yeah, do that.
Listen. Oh my God, listen to our podcast while making love.
We'll have so many Tudor babies from that.
I can bring my register down just a bit and give you that soulful,
Better
deep,
watch.
bassy voice that I'm so well known for.
Let's have some Barawat. I like.
Until next time.
Welcome to Sex Advice from the Tudor crew. Until next time.
Until next time.
Divorced,
I think this is
beheaded,
almost a
died.
prostitution episode.
Divorced, beheaded,
Beheaded,
survived.
survived. Goodbye.